Thank you, Concorla. Minister, the Minister for Transport, Eamon Ryan, made an announcement there some time back that he will be applying a cut in public transport fares for our youth by 20%, and then announced a few weeks later that there will be a 50% cut in fares for students and young people travelling on public transport. This, you will say, Minister, should be welcome. But as it has gone ahead, now it will have a disastrous effects in rural communities, as no local commercial operator, better known to you and me as the private service operator, can avail of the 20% or the 50% deductions. I raised this in the Dáil with the Minister as soon as he announced the 20% decrease in early April, but he still railroaded ahead with it wiping every private service operator off this decrease, leaving many of their struggling businesses with an uphill struggle to survive. The local commercial operator, as we all know, were still reeling from the shock when the Minister announced in the past 2 weeks he is railroading ahead with a 50% decrease for students and young people's travel. Again, something to be welcomed, as many would say, but again, he has nothing put in place for the private operator to pass this decrease to the students, mainly in rural Ireland, stating there is technical and funding issues preventing him from doing so. Minister, this 50% decrease will benefit those who travel in Bus Éireann, the Luas, the train and the Dart and Dublin bus, all Dublin city type transport, which I do not want to begrudge, but for a private operator, we'll say just like West Cork Connect, who carries 80% of the passengers in West Cork routes, has buses leaving Skibbereen and Bantry every hour, on the hour, every day, passing through Clonakilty, Bandon to Cork on one side, and from Dunmanway, Ballineen to Inishannon to Cork and back on the other side. A service, I may add, which has opened up West Cork. This local commercial operator is employing huge staff in West Cork, but is not allowed to pass on the recent 20% or proposed 50% decrease to the West Cork students. It is not just putting his business in jeopardy, but also Wexford Bus, Cove Connect, Air Coach, Go Bus and City Links, all facing the same wipeout. This is another gaffe by your Minister, Ryan. But on top of that, it's a direct hit on the young people of rural communities who totally depend on private operators to connect their communities. Minister, the Transport Minister, with the aid of this government, simply want to wipe out the private bus operators. That's the way they feel anyhow. Unlike Bus Éireann, the Luas, the Dart, Dublin bus and the train, they have to pay their own staff, their own fuel, their own wear and tear to vehicles daily. And instead of encouraging them with so-called Connecting Ireland dream out there, you are going to completely disconnect transport in rural Ireland, because many of these operators are going to go to business because of this. Why was what should have been such a positive announcement by this anti-rural government held off until everyone, rural and urban, could avail of this decrease? Minister Ryan knows of this bias he has created. This government's decision will see private bus companies being forced out of business by state-backed cuts and leaves them now contemplating taking legal action. Not alone is this unfair, but it's anti-competitive as well. Minister, why can't a Minister for Transport get this right? Will this government step in now and treat everyone in rural Ireland as well as urban Ireland the same when it comes to the decrease on fares for our youth? And I have 41 seconds, and I'd like to mention the company I did mention a while ago as West Cork Connect. He's now struggling to survive. He's providing a service that no one ever did in West Cork before. No one ever did. No one ever will touch it again if he walks away from this. And if the Minister, Ryan, continues... imagine the Minister met with him, and I'll say that in the summing up, met with him, told him when he gave the 20% decrease that he couldn't pass on to them because he couldn't afford it. 3 or 4 weeks later, he announces a 50% decrease. I can't understand where the money came from all of a sudden. This West Cork Connect operator is, as I said, is up against it because of these cuts being given to the public transport and not to himself. But also he's been moved from his parking space in Cork City and Patrick Ski, which is now going to be a disaster for him going forward as well. But that's another issue. I'd appreciate maybe
we're grateful to Minister and Rabbit for being here to deal with the fourth item. The floor is yours now, Minister.
Thank you, Concorla, and good evening. I would like to thank Deputy Collins for raising this important topic, and I'm taking this on behalf of Minister Ryan. I understand that the Deputy's question is in relation to the extension of the recently introduced 20% fare reduction initiative on public transport services to include private transport operators as well. Commercial bus and coach operators are an integral part of the overall public transport system in Ireland. They play a pivotal role, particularly in areas around the country which are not covered by existing public bus and rail services. In recognition of this important role, the Government has continued to provide temporary financial supports through the COVID-19 pandemic with a view to protecting capacity across the public transport system throughout the crisis. I am pleased to inform the Deputy that these financial supports were extended earlier this year up until the 30th of June 2022. To date, over 60 million of state funding has been provided to support commercial bus operators during what has been a challenging time as transport demand patterns evolved in response to the pandemic. In relation to the 20% fare reduction initiative, it is important to highlight that this measure was introduced as part of a suite of government measures to help combat the rising cost of living. The Government allocated 54 million in exchequer funding to support this transport initiative. The fare reduction was rolled out to public service obligation, the PSO's service outside the Greater Dublin area from the 11th of April and nationwide from the 9th of May. These discounted fares will benefit the hundreds of thousands of people across the country who use PSO public service transports every day in 2022. The fare reduction is funded until the end of this year. However, the funding allocation does not include an extension of the scheme to commercial operators. Unlike with PSO services, the NTA does not set, monitor or regulate fares on services run by commercial operators. The operators themselves set fares on their services based on their own commercial judgment. While it is not currently intended to include the commercial operators as part of the 20% average fare reduction initiative, it has always been the Minister's intention to include these operators as part of the longer-term Young Adult Card initiative announced as part of Budget 2022. In recognition of the importance of incentivising more young people to use public transport, funding was secured to provide for the introduction of the Young Adult Card on both PSO and commercial services. This measure will allow any person nationwide who is between the ages of 19 and 23 years old to avail of an entitlement for discounted travel costs and to increase the level of discount over and above the current student discount to an average discount of 50% across all services, including city, intercity and rural services. The Young Adult Card was launched on PSO services at the start of this week, with over 1,000 applications received by the NTA on launch day alone. The initiative will be broadened to include commercial operators later this year, with the aim to have in place before the recommencement of third-level colleges. The time lag is due to the fact that it is technically more challenging to roll out fare initiatives such as the Young Adult Card on the commercial bus network than it is on the LEAP-enabled PSO network. An array of various ticketing equipment is in use on fleet used by commercial operators and needs to be catered for. To expedite the process, the NTA has established a joint working group with commercial bus operators to consider options and to develop a plan to implement the Young Adult Card in a timely manner as possible. Such fare initiatives will be of great public benefit to the public transport user, but will not only promote model shift into the transport sector.
Deputy Collins.
Thank you, Minister, for your reply. But in fairness, Minister, you can't talk about COVID-19 supports because, in fairness to these operators, most of them had to take maybe 8 or 10 passengers. So they were absolutely in dire situation at that time. And supports are good at any time, I respect that. But it can't be seen as that supports now will carry you over for the remainder of your life. The bottom line is here. It's very obvious what's happening. Your minister is wiping out the private service operators outside. That's the way they're telling me. That's what they feel. Outside of Dublin, the local commercial bus operators are the biggest operators in the country, carrying out 30 million passenger trips yearly. In a recent meeting with the Minister for Transport, the private operators asked a straight-up question why they were not included in the 20% bus decrease for their youth on their buses. To be told by Minister Ryan that it was for financial reasons he could not go ahead. But to their astonishment, a few weeks later he announces a 50% decrease, again exempting them. Minister, where did this minister find the money that he did not have a few weeks earlier? Was it carbon tax money robbed from the hard-working people of rural Ireland? It's a disgrace that the minister, and no disrespect to you, because you're only doing whatever has been asked of you, but it's a disgrace that the minister is not here tonight to answer straight-up questions and give us a date that the private service operator, who carries, as I said, over 50% of bus passengers in Ireland, can pass on the 20 or 50% decrease to their customers. If he don't, he will be the cause of disconnecting public transport in rural Ireland as is happening already. And the Minister, what I'm trying to say as well, it's an attack on our youth. This is a great idea. I have no objection whatsoever about passing on a 20% or 50% deduction to the people who travel in the Dart or the Lewis. They're the very best to look at them, and we should be delighted for them. But it's surely, if it's good enough to pass it on to them, it's good enough to pass it on to the people of rural Ireland and the people, whether they're in West Cork or wherever they are, in Mayo or Wexford or wherever they are, it should be good enough. And this Minister has failed in his duty to do so because he cannot see outside the pale. It's Dublin or nothing. And that's what's happening here. And the private operator is going to go to business, like I said, and we cannot afford to allow that happen in this country.
Minister,
if we do, it's
please,
disconnecting Ireland. It's what you have done instead of connecting Ireland.
So I would like to reassure the Deputy that both the NTA and the Department of Transport have been engaging directly with the commercial bus operators to help inform policy decisions in relation to the public transport sector, particularly those related to the ongoing impact of COVID on the sector and in relation to the various fare initiatives being introduced this year. In addition to the working group that I referenced earlier, the Department of Transport has been engaging with the Coach Tourism and the Transport Council of Ireland, the CTTC. Since May 2020 to date, 23 meetings have taken place. More recently, on the 25th of March, Minister Ryan met with the CTTC to discuss their concerns and the key issues facing the sector. As I outlined earlier, while it is not intended to include the commercial operators as part of the 20% average fare reduction initiative, which is due to run to the end of 2022, it is intended to include these operators as part of the long-term young adult initiative. The NTA is working closely with operators in order to achieve this shared goal as quickly as possible. However, as the Deputy will appreciate, in order to roll out the card across the commercial bus sector, time is needed to make the necessary changes to the wide array of ticketing systems employed across the network. And the NTA have advised that the intensive technical work to achieve this objective is currently underway, and it is hoped that the young adult card initiative will be expanded to include the commercial bus sector by the end of the summer. Initiatives such as the young adult card and the 20% average reduction on the PSO fares mean that 2022 looks set to be an exciting year for public transport provision across the country as we slowly return to pre-pandemic travels. And I trust this clarifies some of the questions that the Deputy has raised.
Thank you, Minister. House